Maybe you don't love risotto, but maybe you've never tried a really good homemade risotto. Maybe you do love it. Either way, this recipe is perfect for you. Hello and welcome back to cooking. Risotto is one of those dishes that I love, and yet I never order in a restaurant. Unless it's their specialty, it's just not a safe bet. That's because risotto tastes best served fresh, and that takes the kind of time and attention that most restaurants don't have. I worked in a restaurant where they would pre-cook the risotto, let it cool, and to reheat it, they just put it in the microwave with a ladle of stock. Good restaurants. Still active. Today. But enough about that. Risotto is still one of my favorite dishes of all time, and today I want to show you a truly original and amazing recipe. A pumpkin risotto with a garlic and sage butter. It's a dish with amazing colors, textures, and flavors that I guarantee will impress. And I know risotto has a reputation for being difficult, which is why I'm going to give you some tips to make it easier and get perfect results every time. So with all that said, let's jump into the kitchen. First, here's everything you're going to need for the basic recipe. I also like to add a garlic and sage butter that tastes amazing, and some pumpkin seeds and pumpkin oil, which are optional but highly recommended. Now a quick note on some of the ingredients. I'm using a red curry squash, also known as a Hokkaido pumpkin, because I love its color and the skin is edible, which saves you time. But you can also use butternut squash or any other pumpkin you like. Now I'm only going to need half the pumpkin, which is about 600 grams, and I'm going to cover the other half with foil and keep it in the fridge. For the risotto rice, I prefer carnaroli because it has a higher starch content and a firmer texture, so you'll get a creamier risotto that is less likely to overcook, but any risotto rice will do. For the wine, you can use any dry white wine you have. I usually use any leftovers I have laying around, but if you don't have any wine, you can also use vermouth. Now let's get started. Start by preheating the oven to 220 degrees Celsius or 430 degrees Fahrenheit. Cut the pumpkin into 6 large pieces and lay it on a baking tray. I'm gonna roast the pumpkin with a mix of spices, salt, and olive oil, but don't worry if you don't have any of these spices. Salt and pepper will work just fine. Mix the spice with the olive oil, cover the pumpkin pieces with it, and bake for 35 to 40 minutes. While that's roasting, let's prepare the toppings. Heat up a small pan on medium heat and add the pumpkin seeds to toast them, shaking the pan every now and then. This should take about 5 minutes. While they're toasting, slice the garlic cloves into thin slices, slice the sage, and shred the parmesan. Once the seeds are toasted, you can crush them or cut them and set them aside to cool. Now add about 80 grams of butter and the garlic to the same pan and cook over low heat. Once the garlic starts to get a little bit of color, add the sage and cook for another minute or two, then set aside to cool. Now that all the prep work is done, let's start the risotto. Add your stock to a pot and set it to a boil. I prefer to cook risotto in a wide, deep pan, but a wide pot works just as well. Now usually, risotto has a base of shallots or onions and garlic, but since we'll be using the roasted pumpkin and the garlic sage butter, we can skip that step and save some time. Add 30 grams of butter to a pan and add the rice, toasting it lightly for a couple of minutes. Then add a cup of white wine, turn the heat up to medium-high and let it reduce while scraping the pan. Once the wine is mostly reduced, add half of the stock. Now you may have heard that the only way to cook risotto is to add 1 ladle of stock at a time and keep stirring the whole time, but that is simply not necessary. The reason people add 1 ladle of stock at a time is to keep the risotto from overcooking, but it will take more than half the stock for the rice to cook, so you don't have to worry about that. You'll get perfect, creamy, al dente risotto, and you'll save time if you do it this way. Now back to cooking. It's been about 35 minutes and the pumpkin is ready to come out of the oven. You'll know it's done when a fork goes in easily. Set aside 2 pieces, then puree the rest with an immersion blender and a bit of the stock. Once the rice has absorbed most of the first half of the stock, you can keep adding stock 1 ladle at a time until you get a texture that is cooked but still has a bit of a bite, like al dente pasta. Now all rice will absorb about the same amount of stock, but how much of it evaporates depends on the pan you're using and how hot your stove is. While the risotto finishes cooking, cut the pumpkin you set aside into cubes for decoration. Once you're happy with the consistency, add the puree, mix it well, and let it cook for another minute. Now turn off the heat and add your flavored butter, saving some of the garlic and sage for plating, a handful of parmesan, some freshly ground pepper, and then mix everything well and taste for seasoning. Now cover it with a lid while you get everything ready for plating. To plate, start with a scoop of risotto and sprinkle some parmesan and pumpkin seeds on top. Add some garlic and sage, scoop a few cubes of pumpkin, and drizzle some pumpkin oil all around it. And there you have it. Creamy, delicious pumpkin risotto. This is an eye-popping, mouth-watering dish of warmth and comfort. Now I know this dish has a lot of components, so don't be afraid to leave some of them out or experiment with different variations of the risotto. Risotto is just as versatile as pasta, and you can make hundreds of recipes once you're comfortable making it. For me, it's one of my favorite dishes to cook when I have big groups of people coming over. It takes me less than an hour to make, and I can easily feed 4 to 8 people with it without stressing too much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you learned something useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to watch more cooking videos. Thanks so much for watching, catch you in the next one.